Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Friday, March 28th, episode 347, and we're going to talk about no broadband for $42 billion. But first, a couple of things, news events. Judge Napolitano, in his Intel roundtable for the week that was released today, in his conversation with Larry Johnson and Ray McGovern, they talked about the Signal uh, Signal messaging app conversation, uh, with high intelligence members, right? So including Vice President Vance. And they said that it's likely that the chief of staff of Mike Waltz, who was a former Obama staffer, was the one that invited that reporter to the conversation and just slipped him in. And so no one else really bothered to check who else was in the chat. And so why did that happen? For what reason? Was it to embarrass the Trump administration? Probably. And what's so curious, of course, is that the questions and the protest were ready to go as soon as the news hit. They hit the streets. It was very, very quick. Other people have mentioned already that normally when something like this happens, it'll take a month or two before they are brought before Congress and questioned about it. In this case, it happened the day after. And so it would seem that uh, this was planned, it was known, and so they prepared for it. So they were having that conversation about why would they do this, who would benefit, what's the purpose. But then Larry Johnson interjected, no, the point is that the attack against the Houthis was a war crime, primarily because they only hit civilians and they hit people who had done nothing at that point, right? And so there was a ceasefire, I guess, and the ceasefire was not broken, and the Trump administration just decided to bomb them, sort of seemingly out of the blue. But clearly, it was at the request of a nation that was being deprived of its supplies because of what the Houthis were doing, uh, blocking the Strait of Hormuz, I believe. So it's a casual disregard for human life, which seems to be the issue and what should be so controversial about that whole entire conversation. In other words, uh, you could see the kind of conversation, you can read the kind of conversation, the kinds of things that they were talking about prior to the attack. And there was no real significant conversation about the people who would be killed as a result. Next, I want to talk about Hans Hermann Hoppe, who spoke at a Mises event. And let's see, the title was Considerations and Reflections of a Veteran Reactionary Libertarian. And so every time I listen to Hans Hermann Hoppe, um, I, I, it's hard to disagree with what he says. And not that I've listened to a lot, but it's very logical, very thought out. But apparently, he's extremely controversial because of the things that he concludes, which are the logical conclusions that he makes, but are out of step with the political correctness at the time. I haven't heard from him in a while, so I was kind of surprised that he showed up to give a talk. And what he focused on, in spite of the title, what he focused on was the difference between the wars conducted by a monarchy and the wars conducted by a democracy. And it was a broad overview, and I'm sure people, if you're going to nitpick, you can try to poke holes in what he was trying to say. But basically, he's saying that the wars conducted by monarchies were for territory, territorial disputes, and they were usually very quick. Like they were over quickly, primarily because the monarch himself had to finance the war. And when the war came to an end, the resolution was generally long-lived, like 100 years perhaps. And the resolution would last that long because it was a fair resolution, right? It was everyone can see, okay, yeah, that's the way things should be. And so therefore the peace lasted for a while. And this considering that Europeans love to go to war with each other. And then we had the democracy wars, right? Wars that took place as a result of democratic ideologies. And this started with World War One, or what Hoppe would say is the 30 Years' War, right? Because World War One and World War Two are essentially the same war, just dragged out over 30 years. And so it began as a monarchy war. You had royalty warring against each other. And then America joined into the hostilities, and it concluded as a democracy war. And the conclusion of that World War One, so-called, was a treaty that was full of vengeful, vindictive type thinking. There was a lot of plunder. There was a lot of redrawing of borders, right? And so all of the usual things in the monarchy-driven wars, territorial disputes, that went out the window. And so after the war was over, there's a lot of resentment. There is a lot of hatred. There's a lot of emotion. And once you make a war ideological, then you have to frame the war, the fighting, as good guys against bad guys. And so since you won, you were the good guys, and so therefore you could, and you were permitted, you were encouraged to go after and punish very heavily the other side. And this is where you get the kind of very vindictive settling, the very, how shall I say, extreme punishment that is imposed on the losers. And that's what happened. France demanded reparations. France also took the industrial section of Germany away from Germany, further hampering Germany's ability to repay or pay the reparations. Um, you see that even the government of the losing countries had to be changed and modified. And so there's this long-lasting bitter taste in people's mouths, and the peace was short-lived. You know, just within 10 years or so, you begin to see the rise of Hitler because life in Germany was just so bad. But because these democracy-driven wars were so vindictive, more people die, right? And so the total disregard for life is even greater. And that was something I thought was very noteworthy. So we go from having, very short-lived peace to never having peace, right? So the war in Afghanistan was drawn down, and almost immediately the war in Ukraine started. The Ukraine war is winding down, and so now it looks like there's another war gearing up against either Yemen or against Iran, and it's endless. And so this weird phenomena of democracy being something that needs to be spread to the rest of the world is funny, right? This democracy that is being spread is evil. It's violent. It's destructive. Now, if we were to get technical, then we know, of course, that democracy is communism, right? And what we should be supporting and advocating for and trying to spread is what is it? Independence, is freedom, to be in control of your own destiny, your future. But no, that can't be permitted. Everything must happen exactly according to people who are in power want it to be. And they're little Hitlers, right? And you can see this phenomenon, this attitude on every level of society. Even me losing my position in the university, I would say, is part of that. You have the leadership who have this mentality. They have their little fiefdom. They want it to be exactly in the way that they want it to be. And they get rid of faculty who they believe are not towing the line, who are not doing things in the way that they're supposed to, and therefore raining on their parade of having a perfect department, this kind of thing. And of course, in doing so, you create a very boring department where everyone is either too afraid to step out of line or believes what you believe and therefore are going to present the same boring, um, go nowhere ideological stupidity. And I don't know, maybe that's what that's all about. But there is a complete disregard for life. And if not for my belief that there is justice to be found. Everything always, another way of saying it is everything reverts to the mean. Everyone gets what they get, right? Everyone will get what they deserve in the end, somehow. Finally, I want to talk about the Jon Stewart video that's floating around the interwebs these today and yesterday, perhaps, where he finds out that the Biden administration allocated $42 billion to expand broadband to more Americans, and after 4 years, connected zero homes, right? So no homes have broadband through the Biden administration initiative to bring broadband to more people. Now, this story is kind of interesting to me because I know that back in the day when multiplayer gaming online, like the Call of Duty stuff, when it came online, American-based players would generally be outmatched by the Asian players. Now, it's possible that Asian players play more and so are therefore more skilled, but most people attributed it to latency. So in Asia, they had 5G already, and we were still sitting on 4G speeds for internet. And in other words, Asian countries had more advanced internet. Uh, how is this possible? How did the Asians get in front of us, right? And this was, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. So it's probably much worse now. So how is it? Well, we get a good look at it through this process where entities could apply to be able to install broadband in the various states in the United States. And as you go through, it's a multi-step, 14 steps, and they're long and they're drawn out and they're extremely expensive. So, and it's extremely repetitive as well. And so at the beginning, there are 56 different applicants who apply to be able to install broadband. 3 years go by, 3 years to get to step five. And all 56 applicants are there. They're still hanging on. 3 years of just waiting, of filling out forms, jumping through hoops. 3 years. And they get to step five and 26 drop out, right? So there's 30 left at step 12. And then when they get to step 13, there's only three left. And so the step 13 was just so onerous and so time consuming and probably expensive that a lot of them just gave up. And so now we're at step 14. And what are they saying? They say, you can't kill the program now. It would waste all of this effort that we've done, right? Because I guess it's on the chopping block for Doge. So 4 years, millions of dollars spent, not just by the government awarding it to these companies who make it to the next step, but also the companies themselves wasting all of that time and energy for a project that will never go anywhere. I talked about rent seeking before. I'll check, see if I actually did a standalone episode on rent seeking, but I've talked about it before, how you hold out a prize, everyone then fights for the prize and ends up spending more than what the actual prize amount was. And in this case, you have 56. Imagine if all 56 companies made it to the finish line, then you have 56 applicants and 56 companies. All they do for 4 years is just fight for a $42 billion award, right? A contract to be able to put broadband in to the country. But look at all of the money that they spent, all of the capital, all of the time where they could have been doing something else, all 56 companies. But instead, eventually people say it's too expensive and they drop out of the competition. So this process of proposals, government planning, proposals, back and forth, it's really painful. If you watch the video, you know what I mean. It just goes on and on and on. And it reminds me of high-speed rail, right? Oh, we're going to have high-speed rail, and it never either it never gets done, or when it does get done, it's not as fast as promised. And then it's like climate change. We're going to spend all this money to fight climate change, and nothing happens. Or if worse, you get these climate activists burning electric vehicles. You can't write this stuff, right? You can't make it up. And then war, right? Oh, we're going to fight for peace. And what do we get? We get war instead. Like Japan, I remember when I was a child, Japan got a bullet train. I don't care if that bullet train was constructed with a lot of corruption, right? Like it didn't actually go through the high population centers, but was more rural. I don't care. They got a bullet train in the 70s. And we in the United States, for all our we're number one, still don't have a bullet train. And my suspicion, and when I would talk about this in class, I would say my suspicion is that airline industry has a lot to do with this, right? And the monopolies that are now our train companies here in the United States had a lot to do with it. And then the same kind of application approval process that we saw here with this broadband competition, you saw again with trains, with pretty much everything in the United States. And so we never will get a bullet train until we get rid of all of the regulatory agencies. And it's all done in the name of safety, quality, but we get nothing, right? Or you get $750,000 units of affordable housing in California. I've talked about that before, right? So you get a high rise that maybe has 50 units in it. Each one is $750,000. How is that affordable housing, right? It's just ridiculous. And so what you realize quickly is that these are all scams to funnel money to very specific people, right? The people who are left standing, who ultimately get the project, right? They're the ones who have insiders. And then eventually, right, because they're funded by the right people, they realize it's going to take a long time. They're in for it for a long time. And everyone who's putting together the proposals, that's their job to put these plans into, to put these plans on paper. And once they win that contract, they become a de facto monopoly because no one else could hang with the process. And once they got through the entire process, well, so now they know what to do. They have all the templates for all the forms that they need to fill out, right? And no one else can last 5 years, 6 years just to get the permit to begin building. And then you're going to face another set of hurdles that will cause further delays. I mean, most people cannot afford and conduct a business in that way. But if your business is to go through the delays just so you can suck up all of that government funding, well, then that's what you do. right? Sort of like those protesters during, or the people, the audience that would show up for Harris rallies. They were all paid to do that. That was their job, right? And so their job was to pretend to be excited about certain things, right? And so this is what the whole USAID thing, this is what all the all the stuff that Doge is exposing is that government money is paid to fund to make it look like certain things are popular, but no, everyone there is just simply doing a job. It's a different kind of waste. And it's more than likely than not that the people who dropped out early in the competition are the ones who actually had a legitimate, viable plan, but they couldn't survive waiting all of those years, and so they had to scrap it, right? This is why most of the things that government is in charge of, it's not a very good system. It's a very bad system. Like, just think about the Obamacare rollout. If you remember the website that they created, it was utterly useless, right? But the people who received the money got $500 million to create a website that didn't work. And then you had a couple of, college techie guys in one night fix the entire website. But they were, of course, ignored, right? And so this is the thing. These government programs are not there to provide a service or provide value to the citizens. They are there to suck up all the money. It's a scam to funnel money to specific people, to get money to specific people and screwing us all at the same time. It's sort of like war for the sake of war. What do we gain from all this war, right? All this democracy-driven war. We gain nothing. Families lose everything, and we as a country gain nothing. What is the risk? The risks of nuclear war, of nuclear conflict, of conflict spilling over and killing even more people. What's the cost? The cost of, what is it? Hoppe talked about how it's estimated that 20 million people have been killed as a result of U.S. foreign adventurism. 20 million. That's just in people terms, but, and, direct deaths of the war. But what about everything else? The hardship that's imposed, the refugees that are created as a result of all those wars, the kind of mentality that develops as a result of having continuous violence. I mean, you got to think that all those terrorists are really sick in the head from killing people all of the time. And it's too hard to stop. Like, I don't care, a person like Trump getting into the presidential office, he can't stop it. With all of his blustery, all his braggadocio, whatever, he can't stop it either. Right. And so what are we doing all of this for anyway? When I was a kid, people always asked me, because Asians were still kind of not that prevalent at the time, right? And so it was kind of weird to see an Asian on the streets. People would always come up to me and say, if we went to war with Korea, would you fight for Korea or would you fight for America, right? Because they were challenging my loyalty or, some kind of nationalism back then. No one seems to be asking that question anymore. Like, if we went to war with Israel, would you fight for Israel or would you fight for the United States? Why not? Why don't people ask that question anymore? Friedman said it best. Governments never learn, only people do. Maybe without the Department of Education, or maybe it's just reallocated Department of Education. I don't know. But supposedly that we don't have a Department of Education any longer. And now without it, maybe people can learn again. Maybe we can get schools and teachers who will actually teach students how to think critically, to have good analytical skills, and therefore move away from this kind of willful, entrenched ignorance. A guy can hope. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.